All right, we're back. Welcome back. It's WEBD6201 in the winter 2020 semester. That's client-side scripting at Durham College. And let's talk about what we're doing today. So we're still jQuery. We were talking about jQuery yesterday. Just as a review, we talked about how to do queries, how to build queries and functions in jQuery. We talked about where it came from, with what are the 8 major categories that jQuery kind of covers. We were working primarily in the selection and traversal area right here, mostly selection, actually. And we did a little bit of manipulation in CSS. We even did a little bit of event handling yesterday, just a very tiny amount. But I'm going to be focusing on more about forms and how we can manipulate forms, do some kind of stuff. We talked about the content delivery network and what the advantages and disadvantages was yesterday. So you guys should know about that. And then how to use the content delivery network. And then we went right into the basics of jQuery programming. I talked about the generic syntax. So this is your general form, like we talked about last time. And then you get into how to do selections. Remember that whenever you do this, think about in your mind, whenever you do a selection with jQuery, it's, hey jQuery, select all this stuff and return all instances of the stuff that I'm selecting, whatever matches. So if I'm saying, find all paragraph tags on the page, that's what the first thing means, right? So remember that you're returning, if I say all, that word in your mind should mean array. I'm getting a list or an array back, right? So if I get a list or an array back, I have to specify which element of that list or array, if I want that specific element, or loop through a list of stuff that I want to do with some looping tools, whether you're going to use a for loop or a while loop or some kind of for each loop. Some of the same stuff we talked about in previous weeks. Okay, so then we also specified how to get things like, I want to select specific elements, and it's all the same syntax typically that you would use in CSS. We talked about that yesterday. So very similar syntax, and this is why jQuery was really super duper popular. You learn CSS, and then you kind of know how to do jQuery. That's what it was. So really it's for the designers, those kind of people, or people who like to do light scripting. jQuery was fantastic, and it solved a lot of problems. So those are the things. If you're going to be asked on an interview, why would you use jQuery? Because it solves problems. It's quick. It's shorthand, and many times, right? It's a library that we use. It's free and open source. Do you need jQuery? Well, that's another question. Should we use jQuery? So again, selection syntax we talked about. So there would be some selector, and then you use the .accessor method for whatever the method name would be. If you're going to do some special effects on the thing that you selected. So you select something with your selector, and then you do some behavior with the method, whatever that is. That was what we talked about yesterday in a nutshell. And there's some common jQuery methods we talked about as well. And we also talked about event handling and the document.ready function, and how this function, the bottom one, which is this is the short way, well, that's just an iffy in disguise, right? Which is what we already know how to do with JavaScript, and you don't save much by doing it this way, to be honest. However, one thing that jQuery does do is the way it handles events is slightly different than the way traditional JavaScript handles events, right? And here's an example of 2 events. So you have your document.ready event and then your click event. We talked about this yesterday. You can kind of nest one event or one jQuery call inside of another. This is pretty typical structure that we've seen before and other times, right? And then we can talk about filters. Okay, so filters, they work kind of alongside selectors, and they give you more fine-grained control, like it says here. And what it does is, I want to look at all table, a table, as an example, every even row in a table. This is the example. So select every even row. So how does this work? You look at the table inside. I always look at the greater than sign as like inside the table, or some kind of node that's inside the table. That's what the greater than sign means to me, right? I'm looking for a table row node, and I'm looking for, this is the filter, the colon, I'm looking for even table row nodes, every other node, right? That's what this means. Again, we're just going back to CSS here, because this is just CSS in many ways, the way it's done. And there's many, many different kinds of things. We also talked about some basic operations, and these are some other ones. Add class, we kind of used yesterday. Remove class, you can also remove a class if you know that exists. Toggle class, I can turn a class on and off. So if I want to show a special effect and it's part of my class, for example, in Bootstrap, if I want to turn a class on and off, I can enable something to glow a certain way because Bootstrap has a bunch of styles that you can turn off and on. Toggle class might be a good way of doing that. Hide and show, there's two parts to it. You can just hide and show with nothing in the middle. We also talked about the idea of optionals. And what optionals do is there's optional parameters. You can choose to use them or not, right? And this exists in C# and C++ and in Java as well, optional parameters. And if we choose to use them, for example, the duration, I can choose to put a duration in terms of milliseconds or not. If I don't choose a duration in milliseconds, it hides immediately. It shows immediately, right? Or it hides or shows for a certain amount of time. Okay? This is something interesting. Each. So instead of me doing a loop, I can actually do whatever the jQuery, remember, I'm going to return multiple elements from the jQuery selector. Instead of me doing a for loop or a for each, I can just do each. It's part of jQuery. So this is it's all about convenience methods. So let's go back to our code for a second and talk about what we had from yesterday. So again, for those people that missed yesterday's class, we can look at lesson 5. I would be running this thing in Visual Studio Code. Let's talk about Visual Studio Code for a second. So here's VS Code. Drag and drop that in, right? And this is what we had. We had a site structure. I'm just going to close all these down for now. We had a site structure now that, by the way, this will be eerily similar to your lab number 2, right? Where you'll have a site structure with multiple pages. It's going to happen because this is part, we're building on what we did last time. We keep on building this entire semester we're building, right? And now you're going to have multiple pages. And we started off with our index.html page. And then this index.html page has certain content. We've added content to everything. And in our app.js, you can return something. For example, I'm returning here all elements, right, with an ID of page name, whatever that element is, right? And you can see here, if I want to make the button click event, I'm saying, hey, target the button, and all elements with the button of button type. That's my selector. I want to do the click event, right? And then I want to make sure that that button, it only works on the home page content. Remember, we talked about using some kind of switching mechanism. I always like to think about these switch cases in my mind as a state machine, right? So again, state machine might be a fancy word. You might look at it and go like, Tom, it's a switch case statement. Who cares, right? It's true, but have we talked about programming patterns? I don't know if you guys, did I talk about it with you? Sorry, my mind is full and I have lots of programming patterns, right? Programming patterns. Let's talk about programming patterns. And I'm going to digress just for a minute or two just to talk about these things because I think it's good for you guys to know. So I talked about state machine, and you might say, state machine, okay, Tom, what is that? Well, it comes from a set of programming patterns that are out there. What I mean by programming patterns is back in the 90s, okay, this is the true story here. You had a group called the Gang of Four, right? I'm not sure. It's not a gang that had guns, by the way. It was a gang that were really great programmers, right? Gang of Four, and they came up with something called design patterns. Okay, so if you looked it up, here's Wikipedia for you. Design Patterns was a book, and what they talked about was common design patterns in programming. Okay, and they identified at the time 23 design patterns, right? And there was different kinds. There's creational design patterns, structural design patterns, behavioral design patterns. Right, so 3 different types of design patterns or categories of design patterns, if you will. And if you look down, if you go into the design patterns, it talks about all those different types. So, for example, if I scroll down here, I'm sure they're going to talk about different types. Here we go, creational design patterns. So under creational design patterns, we have things like the factory design pattern, or a prototype design pattern, or a singleton design pattern. By the way, these design patterns are programming language agnostic. Doesn't matter if you know JavaScript or C# or whatever language you like to use, C++, Python, whatever. These design patterns are made by these, I would say programming experts in the field at the time, and they identified that there's a bunch of patterns that keep repeating. We always make some kind of singleton. Well, what's the right way to make a singleton? And they kind of outlined the advantages of using a singleton in their book, as well as for what's the disadvantage about using it and any kind of restrictions. And they did the same thing for structural design patterns. Notice that there's adapter, bridge, composite, decorator, and so on. And then finally they went to behavioral design patterns, and one of them is called state, right? And the state pattern, what it allows you to do is it allows you to switch from one state to the other. And they kind of describe this in a bit of UML. So again, unified modeling language, where you talk about here's your current state, and you're going to move from one state to the other state, right? And you have some kind of switching capability where you can switch some kind of structure, if you will, to switch from one state to the other state. Well, I just said it, switch. So whenever I think of design pattern that is state machine, I mean, you don't have to use the switch case. You can use if else. But this could be the mechanism to switch between one page state and another page state. And when I say page state, it's almost like moving from one URL to the next design pattern, right? So how does this work? That means whenever I do a switch case like this, I'm testing to see which page I'm on, right? That's what I've done here. I've created a structure for this. And like we talked about yesterday, I could make curly braces in here and put little, some kind of function or inline or whatever if I want to. But I'd rather call another function that's in here for each of the different pages. So right now we have one function called home page content. And if I scroll down there, this little function, all it does is it targets my list item for the page and makes it active. That's what it does so far. And it also adds an event handler to the button. It targets the click event, right? As an example, the click event. And then here is an inline event handler that's being used with a fat arrow function. Fat arrow functions, or arrow functions in modern JavaScript, we talked about them. They replace function, the function keyword, inline, as well as they maintain scope. So you don't have to worry about the this keyword and its context. So for example, if I didn't use the arrow function, then anything inside these curly braces would have its own scope. However, with this fat arrow, I inherit scope from the enclosing function, which is this, which is kind of cool. Okay. All right, so that is the button. That's event handling, and we talked about switching. We're switching from the home page content to other content. Let's make other ones. Okay, so I'm going to make some stubs. They're going to be empty for now, and then what I want to do is switch from the product content function to the services content to about content to contact content and so on, right? So make a bunch of functions. Again, they're going to be empty for now because we're going to just outline them. So here's our first function. It's going to be called, again, the products content, right? You could also make it so it's behavioral. If you wanted to call this get products content or display products content, you can do that. In fact, I like that. So where we have home page content, let's rename this thing. So I'm going to right click and go rename symbol to, so it's going to say display home page content. I mean, it's a long function, but who cares? It's for us, right? Display products content. Okay, let's keep going. Display services content, right? Okay, so we're just going to break it down here. I could also make this run with multiple pages. Instead of using only one JavaScript page, I can make it so that I have multiple JavaScript files, and each file is different for every page. I could do that. However, can you think about maintaining all those? I have multiple pages to maintain. It might be easier if this becomes too unwieldy, and if this becomes really, really long, then maybe that's a decision I have to make as a developer. So product services, about contents, and there's the contact content, which we're going to work in today. Display contact content. And then there's also the projects content, which we kind of don't really have anything for right now. Display projects contents. One thing you note is I can put these in JavaScript, just like in C# or in modern Java. I can put these function names anywhere I want, and you can access them from anywhere else. So what they do is they hoist these functions to the top. That's what they do, the function declarations. So just keep that in mind. So here about this, I can just start putting them in now. I can say display, and you see I have a bunch of them. I can display products content, right? I can do that. I can also display service content. Let's just fill it in. I'll let you guys do the filling in. I'm sure you guys can figure it out from here if I can just type better. And you can see that all I have, I'm just going to use just the empty functions that I have right now just to delineate or control, I think is the better word, each page separately and in a separate little function. This also helps us out later on because if I want to break these out into separate pages, I can literally just take these functions, right? I can remove them from this page and port them into a whole other page altogether. So I can have multiple JavaScript pages, and then each page has its own function that it allows me to access. So then I have more control. There's less content on one page, right? All right, so that's what I could totally do there. So this is here's all my contents, right? And we're going to have some similarity here, but there's also going to be some differences. So first of all, we don't have to look at the switch case anymore. That's done. Once we built the structure, the switching structure, we're good to go, right? Because I can just now, when I go to the products page, I go to the products content. And now I can just look inside the products content area, fill in some stuff just for products. And this will not trigger if I'm on the home page because this is my guard. I come in here and I'm saying, okay, what's the page name? Well, if it's the index page, I'm not going to display this part. I'm going to display this part. And if there's something common that I want to display amongst all these pages, then I may have an additional thing I can do here, right, for each of these sections. For now, I'm not going to. Okay, so that's display content. So product, services, and about, and whatever, I can do special things. I really want to work in the contact page today because I think we need to work on that. Part of it's going to require a little bit of HTML massaging, right? Because it's not really right. So let's do that now. Let's get that out of the way. So here's our, and by the way, I'm going to give you a template for your next test. I'm going to give you templates and stuff like that you're going to build out. So this is an example of how we do this. All right, so let's take a look at this, what we've got here at the main content area for the contact.html page. And it says contact me, all right? And I've got a bunch of things here. One of them is the email address. Let's think about, is this right for a contact page? Well, no. Email address and password, if you remember how this works, there's a couple things here, right? The first of all is we'll never share your email address with anyone else. Do I really need this in here? I mean, it's interesting, but I don't need it. Let's just get rid of it, just to make it simple, okay? Just going to get rid of it. There we go. It says example input email 1. That is the 4, right? And notice my ID. So when I have labels and inputs in HTML, just a review, right? One is there's something called the for attribute, and it tells you what it is, right? A form-related element, right? And then there's something else called the ID attribute, right? Which we know very well what that is. So the for element has to match the ID element so that with this label really points to this email. And I don't like how big this is. Let's just call this email address, right? That makes more sense to me. So I'm just going to rename the ID, rename the for. Okay. Same thing with password. I want email address. When someone contacts me, I want their email address, but I also want their contact number, right? I mean, that makes sense, right? So which one would you like first, their email or contact? Which one do you think is more important? It really depends on the use case, I would say, but both are important. Maybe I want my contact number first or second. It doesn't matter. Let's put it second in this case. So here, instead of example input password, we're going to say, contact number. That's what we're going to call it. And then again, for the ID, we've changed that to contact number. So these have to match. Excellent. Okay, password. Instead of password, it's going to say contact number. Right? Email address, let's capitalize that so it makes it looks good. Here's something though. Notice it says type. Type is email. Type is password. We don't want type as password. What other types could there be? Right? Well, if you press Control space, it gives you types. Right? It gives you different types. A submit, search, a reset. Different kinds of types. Text would be something. There's also something called tel. That's maybe one we want to use because that tel is telephone number. So why do we want to use these things? On a web page, not going to make any difference whatsoever. However, what it's going to do for us is this. If I use email, it's going to look for an @ sign. That's what it's going to look for here for my email address, right? If I use tel, it's going to look for a telephone number with maybe some kind of area code, right? It's not going to stop you from entering whatever. However, what this also will do for mobile devices, right? Because remember, whenever we make something, website, in your mind, you should be thinking to yourself, what if a mobile user accesses my website? That is a very common use case right now, right? Or a user story, right? So in your mind, we should always be thinking mobile first. I'm making my website for mobile devices more than anything else, right? Why? Because there's more mobile devices that access web pages nowadays than almost anything else. We do it all the time. We access them first with our device, right, our smartphone. So if you put the tell type in here, what it will do, again, this is just review. You guys should know this from your HTML course, right? The tell type here will actually pull up a different keyboard for that mobile device. It'll give you the telephone keyboard, right? It's a convenience function as opposed to some random stuff like text. You don't want a full keyboard for someone. You want just the phone number keyboard. And it'll limit their choices, which means that your validation will be easier, right? They maybe not enter everything in there, right? So those are definitely things we want, right? So a form group, contact number is contact number, an email address, and then you know what I want? I want some kind of text area, which I do not have. And notice that I've got an input type, and there's a label that's underneath it here, which says check me out. I don't care about this. Let's just get rid of this div tag altogether, this whole div thing. And what I might do is copy one of the other two things that I have here. I'm just reformatting my form. There's my form, right? And also, remember that I'm inside of a row column inside my Jumbotron. Maybe I won't want to be in a Jumbotron. I don't know. We might color my form a little bit. But let's take a look at Bootstrap and what they do for forms just to maintain our style. So again, get Bootstrap. I'm just going to go to my documentation. And I'm going to go to my forms component. So components, underneath that you can go to forms. And let's take a look. So here, pretty good. Check me out was a checkbox. I didn't want a checkbox. But we can have several different kinds of form controls. Here's a text area example. I want that because that's going to be my message. Your message is, that's what you're going to send to me, my message, right? So let's take a look and see. They have an example here of what it looks like. It looks like this, text area, right? So I'm going to grab this whole thing here and copy it, go back to my code and paste it. So now I have a text area. And this will be, you know, your message, right? And it says form control, and it says label for, and we can say that is contact message. We'll call it contact message. That'll be the for. The ID will also be contact message. Contact message. There we go. And so now we have a decent form: email, contact number, and your message. I think it's pretty decent. We have a submit button. Guess what? You know, I also want, what if I don't want to submit? What if I want to reset? Can I do that? Maybe I can do a reset button as well. So grab this as an example, and we'll make another button. We'll put it before this one, and we'll call this button reset. So type is reset, and the button is going to be reset. We can also talk about the type. Remember we said blue is the primary button. Maybe reset will be a secondary button, right? So we'll do secondary. So a gray button for a reset. And I'm just going to get rid of that ARIA tag. I see an ARIA tag up here for email help. I don't really need that for now. I'm not using ARIA, although that's great for accessibility. Okay, so cool. Let's run this. I'm going to press Control backtick, and I'm going to go light-server so I can see what my stuff looks like, right? And I want to get right into my contact form, which is the last one, and let's see what it looks like. Hey, that's not bad, right? Looks like a decent contact form now. Okay, a couple things I don't like. It's way too big. Way too big. Like, way too long. I mean, like, email address, never going to be this long. Contact number, chances are that's not going to be that long. Your message, that might be long, but the one thing about messages and Bootstrap, it gives you just this default you know, sizing function. Reset doesn't reset. Submit, though, if you click submit, it actually does something, right? So it actually tries to submit something. Notice that it tries to reload the page and it pulls a little question mark on the top in the URL, right? So reset, you know, it doesn't do much, but submit actually does something to the page. It's an actual action, right, for submit. Okay, cool. The other thing is that in most mobile devices, maybe we won't have an opportunity to put email address, or maybe we want some instructions in here. So that's another thing. We can put something called placeholder in here as well. Let's put that in. So we'll go back and restructure this in a second. So one, I talked about, this is no good, right? Because look, it says that I have row and column in my container, right? Which is my inside my Jumbotron, yeah. But maybe what I want to do for the form is put it inside another kind of row and container. And the way to know how to do that is if you go back to Bootstrap, and if you click on layout, on the top left. It talks about how to set up layout. Okay, so one of the things is container. It talks about how it does a container. There's container small, container medium. These are all different kinds of classes you can access. And it also shows you a grid example. Let's keep going. So here's container fluid. It also, when you want to be responsive, so for example, if you want to have a different container, a different whole setup to use as an example for a mobile device, you can actually specify that class as well. All right. So that's one thing it does from a layout perspective. So this is really good knowledge in terms of how it works, and especially things like Z-index. Right. So that's one thing in layout. Grid is what I want to really look at here. This is the most important part of layout for me, the grid system. One thing to note about Bootstrap, it uses a 12-column grid. We talked about this maybe earlier on in this course. 12-column grid, if you think about what that is, that's about 8% roughly per column. Right, that's what it works out to be. So 12 columns. And why do we care about this? Because I can sit there and say, okay, if I want 2 columns, that'll be 16% of the width of my page, approximately. Why is it good? It's going to be responsive, right? So it's responsive first framework. So that means if I take it into like a mobile device, it'll take 2 columns of that, or 3 columns. And you can specify depending on what you want. So for example, I want 3 columns. Here's a row with 3 columns. This is 3 columns. And depending on the type of device I'm using, so here's let's say a smaller device. So let's say if I made my page smaller, right, then what it'll do is it'll stack. That's just the default behavior for the columns, right? So if I open it up again, you can see that it goes back to different columns, different breakpoints. Even the margin here for the Get Bootstrap site, they use Bootstrap to make their website. Bootstrap, right? I mean, it makes sense, right? So, if you hover in, you can see that turns into a stacked kind of layout, which is kind of cool, which is what we want. And how do they do that? Well, they make it based on breakpoints. So I want column small, 3 columns small, right? As an example, I can do that. I can specify different widths, as an example, and there's different other kinds of options as well, right? So small column. I can also specify, so column, and different rows inside rows. I can make them equal width. I'm just going to go down to more options. Column medium tells you what kind of device I want. If I say column large 2, I can specify how many columns I want. So column medium 5, column medium 2, as an example. That's not bad. So if I do that, and if I say, for example, I want another div tag in here, right? So I've got a column in here, a big column, right? But instead of making it column by itself, I can say column dash medium, right, dash, and let's say, for example, I want 4 columns. Let's see what that does for us if I say column medium 4. So I go back to my page, and let's see what we got. Well, we got something that looks like this. That took like nothing to do for me to make this, right? Now, it doesn't make sense for me to do column medium 4. And notice that it starts right here, right, on the left part of my page, right? Maybe that's a little bit too restrictive, so maybe what I want to make it is slightly larger than that. So maybe so this is out of the 12 columns, this is how I'm saying it, right? Out of 12 columns, I want to be able to have 4 columns reserved for this stuff that I'm displaying, right? I could also use an offset, so I'll keep that for a second. If I go back to this, so again, you can use different kinds of columns. There's different kinds of stacked or horizontal you can specify. Here's an example of column smalls and column medium. You can mix and match different kinds of columns here. But one thing I want to show you is things like gutters and padding. You can specify that. Row columns and column offsets, which is what I want. I think it's column medium offset, if I'm not wrong. And just want to make sure that I give you the right information. No gutters, column wrapping, column breaks. Yep. It's all the same stuff that they had before, and reordering. Yeah, so you can push and pull a column around. So, for example, you can say that here, this is column number 12, where it says the second one. Notice it's on the right-hand side. Where this is column number 1, and it pulls this part here to the front, right? As an example. Or over here. So you can move things around. And the reason why I'm showing you this is because if you ever have to use, any of this, so here, offset dash medium dash, offset means it'll actually push it one way or the other. So an example of this would be Okay, so I say offset dash and the type. So how many columns do I want in front of my 4? Maybe I want 4 columns in front of my 4. So let's say I just go put it in front. I can say offset dash medium dash 4. And if I did that and I go back to my page and it loads, you can see now that it's in the middle. Right? So what have I done here? I said I want a minimum of 4 columns in the front of these columns. And all it does is it pushes my selection in the middle. Right? That's what it does. Now this may not work properly for small devices. I could also specify in the same place where I have my classes, multiple classes. And they'll only be used for those kind of devices. So example would be column medium 4, offset medium 4, column medium 4. But for small devices, right, maybe I want column small 12. So I want the entire space for my small device. Because that makes sense, right? So if it's a small device, then I'm good. And the way small devices work is if I make this small, you can see what it does. It kind of pops into this, right? So it takes up the whole space. This is small width. But as I move into larger widths, well, that's no good. That's kind of a different size, right? If I go to this width, that's a different size. And once I go into my medium width or large width, then I get a different format. So that's how you can change things around for a responsive layout, responsive to the page size that you're coming in. All based on CSS that we didn't make, right? So again, maybe what you want to say is, so column medium 4, maybe 4 is not enough. Maybe you want to put 6 in here. So maybe 6 columns for my actual form. That looks a little better. And maybe not, you can test it. You can see that maybe this is too restrictive with 4. Maybe I'll go 6 and 3. That's 9. And what do I have left on the other side? 3 more. So it's a centered thing, right? So I can say, let's make this 3. And then that moves to the middle, and you can make it look nice. So why am I showing you this, guys? You can control all this stuff with JavaScript. You can make it move around, you can animate it, you can make it come in from the side, you can do all kinds of wonderful things because you have control of the classes, right? All right, so this is where it works, how we can lay things out. And again, if we had that breakpoint, you can see that there's a point where from here to here, there's some problems with this layout. Right? So if I had a device that was somehow this wide, maybe a small tablet, that might be wrong, right? But this is okay. And remember, whenever we get to this low, we also have the hamburger that comes up, so we can actually access that as well. In larger scenarios, though, the hamburger goes away. Once we go into medium size, that's that breakpoint where we have that big of a resolution, then it changes to something much larger, right? Other reasons why you'd want to use this is to show and hide stuff. So, and again, this is all CSS review, right? So for example, one of the things we don't have in our contact page is any kind of social media, right? So in our we should have some kind of social media panel or something like that. And maybe we want that social media panel to be on the right side of that column, right? We can do that inside the same row. Okay, so let's try that. So inside of this is just CSS, okay? That's all we're doing. So again, we can notice that this takes up 3 columns, this takes up 6 columns as an example, right? And we have maybe 3 more columns left on the right-hand side. So we're in the same, I'm just going to collapse this thing. So I'm going to collapse this thing right here. You can do that with VS Code. You can collapse it. So then underneath my div tag, so this is a div class of row. We're in the same row, but what I want to do in the same row is make a new div, right? And with a class of column-medium-3, right? And inside that div tag, we can put something else, like an aside, right? So we can say that there's an aside tag, right? And inside that aside tag, we put some social media stuff like, contact me on Facebook. I don't know if you want that kind of stuff, but, and then you can put kind of a Facebook tag. Where we're going to get that from? Font Awesome, right? So let's go into Font Awesome and see if we can find a Facebook tag. I'm just going to do a couple of them, okay? I'm not going to waste your time here, but I want you to think about this for forms. So let's see if we can do Facebook. See if that's a thing. Facebook, right? There we go. There's Facebook. There we go. Facebook is this, let's say. We're going to use that one. So go here, copy it, copy the square, go back in here, and then I want to put an aside that looks like this. So Facebook square. Let's see how that looks, actually, just this part here. So contact me on Facebook. Facebook square. I might have a hashtag or some kind of link here. I don't have that right now, so I'm leaving it blank, right? And we can wrap this I tag in an anchor tag if you really want to. And if I did that, then I would have a link to Facebook. So let's do that. Let's wrap an anchor tag. So again, I would put the anchor tag, right? Inside the anchor tag, I can teleport this in there, right? So I can just grab the I tag and put it inside the anchor tag like normal. And now that becomes a linkable little square. Okay, let's see how that looks, right? And we're going to go back to our page and see it, right? And look, there's Contact Me on Facebook, and we have a little Facebook icon in there, right? But it doesn't look great. It would be nice if we had some kind of additional formatting. Like you can see that it's on the right side. So here's 3 columns. This is 6 columns. This is 3 columns on the right-hand side. And if I want it to be spaced downwards, I could put it in an additional row and stuff like that. Again, this is all CSS. But I can make this bigger, as an example. It says aside, but I can also look at Bootstrap classes. Let's take a look at other kind of components. So there's cards, carousels, collapsible areas, all kinds of other things that you can use here, which I think are, can be very interesting. Let's do a card. So I want to use a card here for this, just like we did with the other one. So I want to kind of do this. And again, you can specify a card with not everything, something that kind of looks like this. So a card title, a card subtitle, and then something else like this. This might be better for us. So I'm going to grab something like this, no images. And then instead of Contact Me on Facebook, I'm just going to put a card in there like this, right? And now it tells you a specific width. I may not want to put the width there. So the card title is, social media. I might have a Contact Me on social media thing, Contact Me on Facebook, right? So I'll grab that part out of there and put that instead of the paragraph tag. Maybe I'm going to have something like this over here where the card link is. Put that in there. Now it says card link, and that's not a bad idea. So you can specify a class of card link. So that's in the anchor tag. So card dash link. There we go. And then where it says some example of build the card or whatever, you can see that it says that kind of stuff. You may want to also take away this if you want, but we can say we'll specify something else here: social media connections, or how about my connections? My connections. Right, there we go. The card subtitle, if I want it, I can put it there. I don't want a subtitle, so I get rid of it. Again, I'm just formatting, right? And then let's put one more. Let's put LinkedIn. Okay, those are the 2, maybe Instagram. Those are the 3 that I would probably use. So we'll copy these a couple times. And instead of Contact Me on, we'll just put nothing. We'll just put maybe Facebook. And this will be LinkedIn. LinkedIn, right? And let's see if we can get a LinkedIn little icon, right? So we're going to go back to LinkedIn. Where is it here? See if we got LinkedIn, right? Maybe we do. There it is. Wonderful. We also have, I like the square. Since we're using a square, might as well use a square for this one too. So grab that one. Go back to this, and we're just going to transport that right inside this anchor tag right here. There's our LinkedIn, right? And one more, we'll do Instagram, because those are probably the 3 popular ones. Other than, maybe for formatting, we might do something like that, just to keep it all the same, right? And we'll go in here and do that. We'll call Instagram. There's Instagram right there. Grab that. I would have liked to see a different version of this, but that's okay. And sure, we'll just pop that in there. So actually what I'll do is, instead of doing that, I'll grab all this first, because it already has the anchor tag with the class that I want. One thing I definitely want is this card link. I want that card link to be in there. It's gonna style my link a little bit better. But instead of LinkedIn, I want FA-Instagram. So just this part right there, FA-Instagram. Instagram. There we go. All right, so let's see how that looks. Does it look okay now? Is it better than what it was before? I have an aside too. I'm not sure if I want to keep that or not. I want to see. So going back to my page, let's see how it looks. Yay, a little bit better, right? What do you think? One thing I don't like about it is the fact that it's not balanced for me. It's not balanced because I have like Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and then nothing. It's like 3, but I want 4, right? Like I'm dying for a 4th one, right? I don't know if you guys have something else you want to look at, maybe Tumblr or some other thing that you guys, depending on the kind of, what this person is, whoever this, person is, they might have another one. But notice these are all links. These are all linkable, so they can go somewhere if I want them to. Their connections are social media, but what I can do is I can say this is only available when it is this breakpoint, and when I go down to kind of a smaller space, then what I want it to do is disappear or stack like this, right? So I can do that. So I can say that, when it is small, right, it's going to stack, and it needs 12. I need 12 columns. So I can do that here too. I can go to, okay, so column medium 3, but when I'm small, I can say that column small 12. So it takes up the entire width of my phone when I'm in a small situation, right? So I'll go back, and then I can kind of re-specify that. You can see that now it's going to stack, and it's going to take up my entire space if I wanted to, right? And that's down here. One thing to note is that I can't really scroll up that much, just the way things are done right now with my stuff. It looks like there's stuff that's stuck in here, and this is just the effect of how I've done my page. So don't despair. That's just the way. I also have a sticky bottom. And what I want to do when in this situation is I want to add some CSS to give me a little bit of buffer on the bottom part of my page, right? And I can do that to say that only on the contact page, where there is a copyright statement, as an example, I can add in more space. I'm not going to do that here because, again, this is not a real CSS course, but I wanted to talk about this because we need a form to play with. Why am I spending so much time on the form? Well, there's a good opportunity that this form is going to be in or around your test and or your lab too, right? So that's why I'm doing it. We're building it from scratch. You know how the form is laid out, and now we can do something with it. All right, so if I start typing this form out on the page, if I start typing like Tom, and then I just click submit, right, I'm going to get this little error that comes up, right? It's going to say, hey, you're missing the @ symbol, right? But one thing it won't do is if I put the @ symbol in like this, and if I press submit, now I'm good, right? Or one character, that's okay, right? That's all right. I can do that. I can submit 1 character. That doesn't make any sense. Also, from a phone number perspective, none of these things are really, nothing's going to stop me from doing this. So in the form itself, which is up here, we can add additional tags, right? And one of the things we can add in is like a class. And again, this would be on the form itself. So it's just, here it is. I just open it up. I want to put some other tags in here. One of them in the input tag is required. So I can say that, well, you can't make the form go unless you have this in. This is required. If it's a contact form, this is required. I need your contact number and your email address. And you know what? Don't just send me your email address and contact number. I think, your message is pretty important too. So I want to make that required as well. Now, that's more difficult to do, but I can try. So say required. I can also have placeholder text. So placeholder is something else I can put in here. I can split this up over 2 lines, by the way, too. Totally fine to do that. So I can say like placeholder, enter your message here, right? I can do that. And I might want to have a placeholder for these 2 for mobile devices. Maybe I want to hide my label for smaller devices and just has some placeholder text. I'm not going to do that here, but I can do that with CSS. So again, it would be placeholder, something like enter your email address, and then something like Tom at name at example.com, right? That's your placeholder, and you're kind of instructing the user what to do that's in here, right? As opposed to not giving him any instructions. Let's just go to the next one. We'll do a placeholder again, and we'll say something like enter your telephone number, and inside there we'll say 416 555-5555. If you really don't want that, you can also do hashtag. Like these are okay to do as well. So give them the format that they know how to use, right? So they know that this is the format that you're looking for. So again, it's for user experience, right? When you go on a website, you want good user experience. You want to give people some kind of feedback. And then if I go back now, you can see that that exists. It actually pops up right here. However, if I start typing something, it disappears, right? That's what the placeholder is for. So I can say da-da, and then 416-555-5555, right? I can enter my message, hello. Not good enough yet because I haven't done this, but it tells me what to do. So I can fill out that as well. I can say that, tom@example.com. I can put that in. Now this is good enough to go. And if I click submit, right, then it's submitted. Well, what does submit do? By default, submit actually is supposed to send this stuff to a back-end server. Right now, we don't have a back-end server. By the end of semester, we will. We'll be able to submit a form on a back-end server somewhere and save the information maybe in a database or something else. For now, we don't have such a construct, right? But I want to be able to print out or capture some of those things. And the form still is not complete without a couple of other things. What do I need? Do you guys remember what you need to hold data for a form? So forms have a bunch of different attributes, right? Yeah.
Are you talking about secondary ones?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you know what they are? Do you know which ones we need from a form? Notice, so we have ID here, we have type, we have class. Is anything here enough to give me some that I can hook into this stuff to get some information? I want to be able to get the information that I just entered, right? I don't want to lose this stuff. And I want to be able to transport that information to the server. How do I do that? Well, I need some other constructs. So there's a couple more. There's title, and there's name, and there's value. Those three things, right? So let's talk about this. Let's see what name does. So if I say name, right, and if the name is, it should be the same name as the type. So email address. It should be the same thing. Okay, so there's that name. I'm going to copy this a couple times. So email address, and I'll put another one in there here. Instead of email address, this will be contact number. It's important stuff, right? And the other piece I want here is the message, contact message, right? So again, the name is contact message. Okay, cool, right? Contact message. What I want to do is I want to hijack the form now. So here's where JavaScript comes in finally. Whew, made all this stuff, spent all this time. Now it's JavaScript time. So what do I want to do here? When I click the submit button, okay, now hear me, in your mind you start thinking problem solving. Okay, when I hit the submit, which means I need an event. When I'm clicking the submit button, I want to prevent the default behavior from my form. I don't want it to submit, right? By the way, this form itself does not have any kind of default behavior. For example, I don't have a post or get up here as well in the forms, right? I could control space, look at a bunch of different attributes. These are all the different kinds of attributes that I can specify. So for example, I can say, if I look at the type or method, if you will, and I can see these are the three methods. I can use get or post or dialog. What I want to use is, again, does anyone remember from your HTML course, I'm hoping, what the difference between get and post is? Okay, what's the difference between get and post? Anyone want to offer that up? Yes?
Post is the information on the URL. It gets stores it.
It's the other way around. Yeah. So post, it hides the information. Get saves the information. Why would I want to save the information on a form? Because then I can jump back to that, and it'll have a completed form for me. What do I want to hide it? For security reasons. Whenever anything that I send, for the most part, should be post, for the most part. So I can use method post, right, which is going to hide the information. It's not going to show it on my form, right, as an example. However, if I was going to do a forum post, right, and I click submit, I want to add another forum post, something else on a forum, that I would want to maybe have as get, because I want to show, what I have in my form, right, my URL, so I can teleport there if I want to again. But post is definitely what we want to use for now. Okay, so post, good, but I want to hijack this functionality. So whenever I click the submit button, I don't want it to submit. I literally want it to stay the information. Okay, so how do I do such a thing? So first we have to hook into this thing, right? We know the button is a button. We know the type is submit, right? We know these things. I could put an ID, which I recommend. I always think when you're designing a web page, you should put an ID, and you call this button submit button. Guys, it'd just be easier to get to this later, right? And an ID of reset button. Let's be smart about it. We'll plan ahead. We know chances are we're going to be connecting to this thing. And chances are the best way to connect to this thing is some kind of hook. I can hook into it generically with a class or the type, but the easiest thing is some kind of ID because these two buttons are unique. There's only one submit button, and there's only one reset button on the form, so it makes sense that these things would be there. All right, let's go back to JavaScript now and fix this problem. So inside the display contact content area, this is where we can do it. We want to hook into this. Let's use jQuery to do this time. So we're in jQuery, right? So jQuery, hey jQuery, I want to match a selector that matches that thing, a hashtag of, again, submit button. Okay, that's the actual, we're getting access to this, every button that has submit button in it, okay? I want to use the click event, right, of this button, and in the click event, I want to create an anonymous handler, right? That's what I want to do, an anonymous handler. Inside the anonymous handler, I want to prevent default behavior. So if I start typing prevent default, right? This is what I want to do. I want to event. There's usually some kind of event, and then I want to prevent default. There's the method that I want to use. By the way, you can always say that instead of event, you could call it whatever you want up here. For example, a lot of times you might see E, right? This is totally valid. E, prevent default. E is implicit. It's there, right, whether you hand it in or not. So when I click the submit button, if I did everything correctly, it'll stop me from submitting. But it also does some other bad things. Let's take a look at what it does. If I click submit now, nothing happens. But literally, nothing happens, which means, guess what? My address stuff that I had here, no. There's no validation anymore. The validation is gonzo. Because I prevented default behavior, right? So now if I enter this information, tom@example.com, and if I put in my contact number and 416-555-5555, what a wonderful number that is. And if I put in my message, hello, right? And I click submit, normally we'd get rid of it, but now, no. It prevents default behavior. I got to manage the form now manually myself. And this is maybe what you want to do. You maybe want to manage your form, right? Okay, what else can I do? Well, I want to take this information and create a class, right? Okay, now we're getting into some more details. I want to create some kind of container because now this is going to be an object. I can do it in two ways. I can make a simple object type, like with curly braces, that object type, anonymous object, right? And it's going to take a few things. The anonymous object is going to have a email address, a contact number, and my message text, right, or whatever, right? I could do it this way, but I'm loath to do those kinds of things, right? I'm more of a programmer that likes to make structures, right? So what I want to do is I want to create this, some kind of contact class, contact information. I want to send this because each of these contact packets, maybe I want to have a database somewhere of all the different contact information I've ever had, right? Maybe not, but I'm saying I could structure it this way. So again, what I'm saying is, what you could do now, once you've prevented the default behavior, on click. So I want to do everything inside this little function here. First, I prevented the behavior, and then I want to get access to the form, right? I could do it up here first. I could prepare and start getting access to everything. So inside my function. Now, why inside this function? I don't want to do it in the global space, the space inside of my larger function, my IFI, because that would be for every form that I have, for every index, for every page, right? I only have one form. My one contact page is inside the contact.html page. So if I did it somewhere else other than in here, I'm going to have errors all over the place because these structures may not exist. I might not have a submit button. In fact, I don't have a submit button anywhere else. Or what if I have multiple forms, right? And I have the same submit button. It might even be called the same thing. I don't want to access the submit button in another form by accident, right? So, so I want to do everything inside here. This is where I'm going to be working from now on, in here. So first I want to get access to some of the structure that I have here in my pages. So again, going back to my contact.html, I want to get access to my email address, my contact number, and my contact message. So let's do that. So I'm going to say that let email address, right, equal to, and again, we'll use jQuery for this, $, right, hey jQuery. I want all elements with an ID of, right, email address. Here's my element with an ID of email address. But I want the first element back. So we could start trying to think about doing it like this. Okay, now remember that this is not the same as JavaScript. You might be surprised what you get back here. So let's try it. And let's just copy paste because we need all of them. So email address, contact number, and contact message, right? So this is contact number, and this is contact message, and that's what we want here. Okay, those three things. So those I have all that information, and let's just like print all that out. So let's just, after this, console log, when I have things filled out, in here I'm going to say I want to access my email address, right? And let's use the new backtick structure. So again, I could change this into backticks like this. Let's get rid of these. Backtick, remember, is a template string, and I can use $, curly braces to inject the data that I want. So for example, this will be email address. So I don't have to use the concatenation form. I can use this form, right? And let's just use several console logs, just like that. And this would be, again, instead of email address, this would be contact number. Just going to do this quickly, as quickly as I can, so not to waste your time. And then again, this would be contact message. Okay, cool. So if we're right, when I press the submit button, and only when I press the submit button, I'm going to get the information from here. Cool? That's what I want. Back to my form and check it. So here I'm in my form, and I put some information in there. So again, I'm going to say, like, you know, tom@example.com, and I want to get my contact number, 416-555-5555, my message, right, hello world, and then submit. Okay, let's take a look. Did I get that? Inspect. I want to go to my console, and if I'm right, then I get all this. But, oh man, what the heck? What happened here? How come I got these elements? Well, that's not what I want. Okay, I got these HTML input element. Okay, so this we're halfway there. We're halfway there, right? I want to do my email address dot value, but jQuery has a convenience function to do this, right? Remember, if I hover over, it tells me what I get. HTML element. I don't want to return HTML element. I want the stuff that's inside there. So I could go here and say value, right? And what value does, if you hover over what value is a method. So I could say the value, I want to return something. And I can do the same thing for all of these things. So I want to get the value of my area here. Let's see what I get now when I do this. If I hover over email address, it gives you a hint. It says string, number, string. String, number, string. Okay, so let's see what I get when I do that. And let's try again. So I'll say tom@example.com. Contact number. And we'll do a message. Hello. There we go. And if I click submit, then I get this. I get nothing. What did I do wrong? I mean, I had values, but none of this transferred. And if I click it again, I'm just going to get that whole message thing again. So, right? So that's not it. All right, I'm just experimenting with you guys, just so you understand, okay? All right, what about if I said 0 and value? Can I get that? So remember, I can just test it. It says, well, this is interesting. It says, uncut type error 0.value is not a function, because now val is not jQuery anymore. Val is part of jQuery, but maybe I can do something like node value, or I want to have text content or something like that. Now, that's the thing. I want the value of what I'm getting from my form. And again, if you look this up, so form data, JavaScript. If you looked it up, it'll probably take me to a W3 school thing. But here, let's using form data. Here we go. So input, we want not the form object, not select stuff, but form, I'll say input. Yeah, well, maybe input. Value from that form element. Okay, so there's the form element, Donald Duck, right? And this is exactly what we have. We have name, and we have value, right? That's what we want. We want the value attribute, right? And here what it's doing is it's going to whatever the element is, dot value. Value itself is a property, right? So in this case, it would be just like value, right? Not node value, just value. If we got the right element, if we're using jQuery. Okay, so, and let's see if we get what that does for us now. If I go back to my page, does it give me what I want? And the answer is, well, there's nothing there yet. So let's put something in there. So we'll say Tom, and we'll just say submit, and then wham. Nope. Right, that's not good. If I was going to do this instead of with jQuery, all right, if I was going to do this with something else, let's say, for example, I said, let's just comment this out for a second, right? And if I said let email address, right, and that's equal to document.getElementByID, and then I said that the element is called email address. Well, now this is a specific element, and then I want to say, well, I want the value of that element, the value, not the node value, just the value, right? Remember that this is just an element. I'm not, specifically talking about certain things. Well, this is my problem. My problem is I'm treating it like an HTML element, and I should be treating it like an input, right? That's the difference. One is an input. For example, if I said, if I say value, because node value is going to give me some email string. Let me show you what that is. If I give you node value, it's not the same thing. So if I was to click submit now, null, right? And if I go down to Tom and click submit, then I'm going to get null again. That doesn't give me what I want. Node value is not the one I want, right? And we're close, but that's not what it is, okay? And remember that we're getting an element. We're not getting input. Okay. So going back to this, take a look. So we're good with name. We've been able to hook into it. This is good. This is how we hook into things. And we've got a bunch of data, but one of the things is the type is input. Input. So what if we didn't do it this way and we did it the other way? We said that instead of getting get element by ID, we get elements by tag name, get element by tag name, and then we say the type is an input, right? And now we know specifically that if I hover over address, it's of type input element, right? Input element has a different class, and maybe I can get the value from that, right? So one thing to also do is if you want to ever try this out, you can always go to, if you're ever confused, you can also do a console log on that item, right? So what do I get when I get this from an experimentation perspective? So I do that, you can see that I get the HTML collection, right? Because I'm getting more than one of these inputs. I'm getting an array. Remember, get elements by ID. But I want the element, right, with a tag name with some kind of ID of whatever it's going to be, right? So I want a specific kind of element, right? So if I look at the first element, that's going to help. That's going to be helpful when we only have one on the page, right? Then I can maybe do value, and you can see that that works out, right? But that's the first element. I'm just trying this out as an example, right? So then if you notice, if I just go to here and I press Tom, and then I go into the submit page, then I'm going to should get Tom back, right? I'm not. Okay. This prints out when we're hijacking it nicely, but what we really want to do is go through here and let's make sure we have everything we need, right? So again, we have type, we have name, and we have value. Value is not being stored. We don't have a value element here. And what if we put a value element in our page? And maybe that's what we're missing. So let's go back to our index.html, and we just put a value in there. Remember, a placeholder is something that we have. But what if we just put a value place in there too? Value, right? And that's equal to nothing. So we don't have a value in there. What happens when we do this? I'm just going to do it on 1 and show you what it does, the effect this has. So again, going back to the page, what's the effect that it has? No effect. That's good. So what if this value attribute is what I want, right? That's what I want. And I put that in there for placeholder. I've got that. And if I go back and put Tom now, we're looking for the value element, and we don't have it. Still nothing. Okay, so again, going back. So we have all this, right? Same stuff that they have, right? What are we doing wrong? We have our function that does it. We're hooking into it by ID, just like they did. And then here's our X element, right? And then we're looking at for each value that we're getting, each ID, because there's multiple ones, right? And it says form L. So this is like the ID, form 1. So we're actually hooking into the form itself. That's what this is doing, right? That's X. And then what it's doing is it's looping for every element, right? Every element of the form and looking at its value and printing it out. That's what it's doing. So we're kind of doing the same thing, right? Now, why can't we just do this? Why can we not prevent default behavior and try that? Because one thing they don't have is this, prevent default behavior. Because if I did this and I submit, just showing you what happens, right? And if I go back to this and if I press in some data, watch what happens here. I don't even get the other stuff now. Look. If I go here, first of all, I got to put everything in, tom@example.com. I can't play around. Here's my number, 416-555, whatever. And then some message, right? But if I press this now, watch down here, it says refused. I'm getting an error because it's trying to post something to somewhere that doesn't exist, right? We're trying to do a post. There is no server. So because there's no server, it doesn't know what to do, and we're getting this error. Okay, so that actually carried that through. Look, when we came back, though, look how I captured that value, right? So, yeah, we prevented default behavior, right? But remember what we talked about when we prevented default behavior? What it does? It prevents everything. Prevents it completely from happening. So we don't have our default behavior happening. So when I click onto this again, it's going to give me an error. But when I come back, you can see that when I refresh the page and if I inspect the console, I have my data right here. And this means that what we've been doing so far is pretty good. This is the value, right, that we're getting. But this event prevent default behavior stuff is preventing us from getting anything from there. Why is that? Okay. So what if, put this back, so we want to do prevent default behavior, but I want to take this thing here, this part, and I want to put this thing down here. What happens in there, in this scope? Remember we talked about this. This is now an email address that's local to this particular scope. Will it make a difference is what I'm asking. So going back there, and if I press Tom, and then enter, my contact message is nothing, but my email address is now Tom. Yeah, baby. Remember I said that jQuery has weird-ass effects? This is one of those weird-ass things, the way it works. Okay, so we got everything right. This is what I want. Now, if we know that this is incorrect, let's pass these things. Let's pass these things inside there too. So like this. Okay, there's that. We get rid of this now. We don't need this anymore. Okay. So there's my event. I'm doing these things, right? And I want to print out the email addresses of everything else I got. I want to prevent default behavior. Let's try that out again. So we'll say Tom contact number is, let's bring this down just a little bit. It's bugging me. So 555, and email message is hello, right? And if I click enter or submit, then I get everything. Okay. I'm pointing these things out because you're going to have these kinds of issues, right? With all this stuff. And look, this is equivalent to this, right? This val works nicely, right? And if we did it, if we work it properly, we can just literally put that in there. So instead of input 0, because input 0 is very generic, I want my input to be back to what it was. Hey jQuery, right? Hey jQuery, I want a hashtag with email address, right? This hashtag, I want you to give me the value of that hashtag, and that's what I want you to return. And now when I put this in, right, and hello, then when I click submit, I'm good. Okay? Make sense? So events have a funny scope, funny way of doing things. They mess with context a lot. Even with our fast and furious arrow function here, it can mess you up, right? So just be careful when you're doing this kind of stuff. If you're stumped and if you look online, you're like, wait, but it should work. Then it's something to do with the event. Okay. So that's number one. So now we know we can capture it. This is where we can capture it. But now I want to make a new object. I want to make a new object, and I want to have that object to do something with. I want to be able to send this back to my back end somehow, right? So how do I do this? How do I send my object to my back end? I have to have an object. So there's a couple ways I could do that. I could make an object. Let's make it up here this time and see how bad it can be. So I can make an anonymous object, right? So I can say that let contact object, we'll call it contact object. It can be equal to this, some kind of curly braces, right? Remember how we can do it. We can say that just like that. We can say that since this contact object is a thing, right? Contact object. We can say contact object dot, now I'm not going to get code hinting, email address, right? Well, that's equal to this, right? And I can do the same thing for the other ones. Let's see how that works. So I can kind of do those. Instead of email address, we'll say contact number and contact message. So this is definitely a way that we can do it, right? This is a way. And just to show you this, remember this is locked in here. This contact object is in here. There's no way we can do anything with it in this context, right? Because my contact object is here. But what if my contact object wasn't here, but rather it was somewhere else, like inside my page somewhere, like up here, right? And it's empty, an empty object for now, like way up here, okay? Okay, so can we print out my contact object inside here somewhere? So console log, contact object. What does it give me, if anything? Does it give me anything when I do this? Okay, and if I go back out and I start putting some stuff in, Tom 555 and hello, if I click submit, it's going to give me a bunch of stuff. It gives me Tom 555 and hello, because that was the output for my console log. And then down here, it's giving me this stuff, an actual object. I've created an object with a prototype, so a superclass of object. Now this is where you may not like that, right? If you're a Java programmer or a C# programmer, this might be too loose for you. Wait, how the heck did we get that? Well, that means that once I assign stuff, remember we talked about objects last time? If there is no property called email address or contact number or contact messages, my contact object. I'm making it up. As I'm assigning it, I'm creating it. That's how objects work, right? If I really want to be specific, I could specify that those things do exist, right? I can make my object in real time. I don't have to even use that, and I can pass it out, right? But that is, to me, a lot about less control. Let's make a class. We're going to call this class our contact class, right? Call it contact. And my contact class is going to have 3 properties: email address, contact number, and contact message, okay? We'll store this class in another file, right? And see if we can get access. First of all, we'll do the class in this file, all right? So up at the top, outside of my use strict, right, way out here, I'll make another class. I'll make a class. So I'll come up here. And when I put things outside like this, it means like it would normally be sitting outside somewhere too, right? So let's make a new class. And my class is going to be called contact. Here's my contact class. In my contact class, I want to have a constructor, right? So here's my constructor. The constructor can take a few things as optional, right? So I want to have my email address and my contact number, as well as my contact message, right? Except I don't want to call them contact number. I'm going to call this, well, I can call it contact number, it's fine. Right? And then I can say that this dot email address is equal to email address. This dot contact number is equal to contact number. And then this dot contact message is equal to contact message. This is straight JavaScript, no TypeScript here. So I get my constructor, I make a new contact, and I pass in some of these values, right? Okay, so pretty straightforward stuff. Value type is any, right? I could specify by defaults. I could do this, right? So I could specify default values. Contact number, they're all going to be strings at the end, right? String, string, string. And if I was to do this, and if I hover over now, you can see that these are all strings. My contact number is even a string, if you think about it, right? It's not a number. I'm not going to add it to something else, right? It's a category of something, right? Then I have some of these things. You can see that because I'm assigning a string from the constructor to here, and I've put in some default values, right? That means if I don't enter anything, they're just going to be blank. That's what it means. I could have some kind of thing for my contact class. Like, for example, I could return, a special address or whatever. But for now, this is enough. This is my little contact class. Let's leave it here for now. Okay, we might move it somewhere else. So if I go back down to this now, instead of doing this, I could specify that I want to, at the top of my file where I have my contact object, I could say that the contact object now is a new contact, right? A new contact like this, right? It's empty by default, right? So if I did this, you can see now that that is of type contact, right? And if I scroll all the way down here, I can just rejig some of this stuff. Contact object is equal to this. Notice it says these are all, this is of type contact. This all total works though, right? Now let's see what happens when I do my log, my console log, because it's a different kind of object, right? So I go back out and I come to this again. Let's go Tom, and we'll say phone number 416-555-5555, and I put my message in here. So example, it would be hello, and click submit. Hey, and then I get my information. It parses it out, but now I have this really cool little contact, and my prototype is still object. Right? So is there any difference between one and the other? Well, the only thing is that the only difference is this right here, contact. The other one was anonymous. The same thing is because remember, my contact is a brand new class that I made. So its superclass is the prototype class, the proto object, or the object superclass, right? That's why this comes up. So why are these good? Because if I was going to add this to a record and a database, I could pass my contact object as an object, right, to the database. The database could be receiving an object of the same type, and then it could know what it's receiving. It's receiving a contact object, and it can listen for those three properties: email address, contact number, and contact message, and then put that into the database. Okay. Now it still doesn't look quite like a form. We still have some validation to do, and we still have to get rid of this stuff. When I click the submit button, I want to get rid of that stuff. Right? So how do I do that? So again, we have access to the email address value, right? So now I want to reuse something, right? Now remember, I could put functions within functions, right? And I got to be very careful when I do this. If I embed a function like this instead of a function, this means it's a local function. So let's say this function is going to be called clear, right? Like, for example, clear form. And the clear form function that I can have is only accessible inside this function, right? Again, you may not like this. Please bear with me when I do it, but it's totally possible you can do this. So what I want to do is, in this clear form function, right, I want to get access to this stuff again, right? So this stuff, here's duplication for you. I want to get access to this stuff, right? And I want to clear it. So is there some way of clearing the form, right? Is there some way of clearing that, right? So clear form is a thing, but I want to clear each individual field, right? So I want to clean or clear, or I could just make it so it's just this. So I want to just reset the form. I can change the value, right, to something else. I could say specifically, instead of even storing it, because I'm never going to use this thing again, I'm never going to use those things, I can just say that, hey, jQuery, I want to have this value equal to this, right? Because I don't need to have a variable now. I just have to do something with it. If I'm doing something with jQuery or even JavaScript, I can literally just do this, and what that would do is it would clear up each of those values. Remember, it's both a setter and a getter, right? That's kind of what I'm hoping it will do. Cool? Little clear form. So I want to call this thing at the end down in here, right? So when I do this thing, here's my submit click. I want to do this, but I want to clear the form. So clear form, right? Now this clear form function only available, it's only accessible, it's inside of my display content function, right? So it's an inner function, if you will, a function within a function. And people don't like that kind of stuff because they're like, wait, that's ugly, it's not good, but it's actually really useful to do. All right, let's see if I can do that now. So again, I want to go Tom, and I want to do some testing, and let's just put some stuff, right? And then I can just click submit, and then, whoa, okay. It says invalid left-hand side in assignments, right, at clear form. All right, so it's trying to do something with my value, and my thoughts are this will be the value, but it says the method, it takes in a string, right? It takes in a number. Now this is what it returns. It says get the current value. Does this say set the current value in here? No. So I'm trying to use this thing in the wrong way, and actually give some great examples, by the way, in here about how to do that. So yeah, no. Yeah, no, right? So we can do it the other way. We can say that, well, what if, can we clear the form? Is there a way of doing that with jQuery? So again, if you look at, JavaScript, clear form, right? So there's a form reset method, right? Document.getForm, and then we reset. Well, we should be able to do the same thing with jQuery with one line, right? We should be able to say something like, whatever the form is called, if jQuery was good, we could look for the form name. And by the way, do we even have a form name? Because now we can see that the form method is post, but there's no name for the form. Let's give an ID for the form, which will be the contact form. That makes sense to put that in there, right? Because then we have control, contact form. And let's see if that works. So contact form. Cool. Well, I want to reset you somehow. Well, that, as you see, there's no code hinting, and that's a good example of maybe that's not what we can do with jQuery. Yes?
Would you need to have the hashtag?
Even if we did. Yes, we do. But even if we did, notice that I got no code hinting. No code hinting for jQuery, because remember, we've got our library in there, our jQuery.d.ts file, which is our type definition library. If we don't got code hinting, guys, chances are it's not going to work, right? And if I go back and I go to my form and I try it out, so Tom and da-da-da, right, and submit, it's going to give you an error, right, because there is no such thing as that kind of thing on jQuery's selector, right? So that doesn't work. But I want to do kind of what I was thinking last time, but instead of doing a reset, let's use just plain old JavaScript. So say document.getElementById, right? The contact form reset, as an example. Let's see if that works. So it's the reset on the contact form. And again, we'll try that out, right? So 555, and then some text, submit, right? And it says, well, we got this stuff, but it says cannot perform reset of null, right? Reset of null. Well, what the heck does that mean? Reset of null, I'm accessing the contact form. Well, yeah, well, guess what I have in there? ID, I don't need that hashtag. Let's try that again. Silliness. Tom, now we're still not addressing the other problem, the other elephant in the room. Hello. Submit, right? And now we're good. I want to do the same thing, but I want to do it with jQuery. So this is the element by ID, right? And I want to do a reset function, right? Is there something that I could do that do the jQuery like this as well, right? Is there? So I'm getting access to a form element, right? Now remember what jQuery does for us. If I did this with jQuery, let's rewrite it with jQuery, because we want to understand how to do it with jQuery. That's what this whole thing is about this week, and let's do it. So hey, jQuery, I want a ID of contact form, right? This is cool, but you know, I want the first one. Now let's reset that. Is that possible? Can we do this? Can we reset this? Is that possible? Does that work for jQuery? Remember, because we're still doing the same thing, right? And yeah, it's pretty good, right? So we can do that with jQuery, right? Because remember, this returns a list of all IDs, all elements with an ID of. Remember, when we do a query, we're not doing a query for jQuery. We're doing query selector all. I want to return multiple elements that meet that criteria all the time. Okay, so I want the first one. So kind of cool for clear form. Well, guess what we're going to do with this reset function? We'll just keep this so we can remind you we can do it both ways. Well, yeah, cool, jQuery. I got the submit button, click, but then I also have the other button, which is the reset button. So I want to say that, hey, $, I want to get to the reset button right here, and I want to do the click event, right? I want to do the click event. With the click event, which is, how about we do it right? The click event, I want to, when I click on the reset button, I want to call clearform, right? Because that makes sense. So let's say if I added some stuff in there, but I disagree, and I don't want to submit everything, I want to just clearform that too. So cool. Or, and maybe what I want to do instead, if you don't like this, I can URL redirect back to my home page. I can do that too, whatever you like, right? Let's try this first. So again, imagine if I have some stuff on my form, right? You know, 555 and hello. I'm making some shorthand here. And if I click reset, it's not going to leave my page. It's not going to print anything else down there. It's not going to create an object. It's just going to reset the form. So that's pretty good form. So that's a good use of a little function that I can make. Okay? Are you with me? Again, forms, forms, forms. So much to do with forms. It's crazy. All right. Form validation. We know it's required, but who cares if it's required anymore? Because even though it's required, right? I'm not doing anything with it. I'm not checking to see that the form is validated because I've turned off my default behavior. Once I turn off my default behavior, all bets are off. I don't have to worry about it. But you know, a lot of times what I want to do, I want to turn off my default behavior so I can do this exact thing that I'm doing. I can test. While I'm testing, I can turn off my default behavior, and then I can, you know, set this up. The other thing I can do is I can use a little, remember what I talked about before. I never ever want to use an alert unless it's like truly, you know, important. What if this form wasn't a little form? What if it was a large form that I was filling out? And then you were going to press the reset button. This is a great space to put an alert, all right? And there's different kinds of alerts we can put. We can put an alert, and there's also something called a confirm. All right, let's try this out. So in my form, I want to clear my form, which is this. Instead of just clearing the form, I want to put a confirm. So again, there's an alert, right? And then there's a confirm. And a confirm, if I open it up, says this. Here's my message. It's a Boolean, right? And I can say that that's the case. So if confirm, right? If that's true, my message is, are you sure, right? So that's my message. If it's true, then I want to clear form, right? Otherwise, don't, right? If this is true, clear the form, otherwise don't. Okay, let's see how that works. So I'll go back here, plus some stuff in here. Yeah, sure. Tom, some really important information that took me way too long to enter in, right? And then I click reset by accident. Should come up with this. Are you sure? Well, if I'm sure, I would say okay. If I'm not sure, I'm going to say cancel. And if I say cancel, oh man. Oh man. What happened? Well, this is interesting. I want to talk about this. Because the type, this is interesting, and I want to point this out for you guys, because sometimes you're like, wait, why did that happen? Of course it's going to happen, because of my type. So if you look down here, what type is this? Reset is the default behavior of the button. I want to also prevent the default behavior of my button so I can control when it resets or not, right? This is a great case for default behavior stopping, right? So I want to stop the default behavior. I want to do the exact same thing I did up here with this, prevent default behavior, right? So when I go down here, prevent the default behavior, right? And then now that this does this, it won't reset unless I tell it it's okay, right? So I can go back, right? Here's my contact form. And let's just try it again. So Tom and 555. And I wish I could put lorem text in here, but I can't. Some really crazy important info, right? And I want to click reset. It says, are you sure? And I said no, and now we're good, right? However, if I reset and I say okay, then I'm okay, right? So it deletes that stuff. Cool? Again, you might think these things are pretty crazy, right? But we want to put this stuff in here because we want to specify the kind of like how to control some of this stuff. Okay, what about if the form, I want to get some event handlers. There's also form event handlers. One thing we haven't done is talk about each of these things as an entry, right? So whenever we enter stuff in, we haven't validated any of the information that's going in here, right? So for example, if I can put an event that tries to make sure that, the minimum amount of the word length, if you will, or the total length, minimum length of any text that's input in here has got to be something like, I don't know, total fields, right? If I had, I don't know, my name was 2 characters, al@me.ca. I don't know if that's possible, right? That's maybe the minimum number length that I can think of, right? So that's two characters for my name, 1 character for my @ symbol, right? 2 characters for my domain, right? Me, and 2 characters for my country code. So that's a minimum of 8 characters that I need for an email address. Make sense? Minimum 8 characters total for my email address. So what if I have an event for the email address field, right, that I don't want to be able to submit. I want to allow you to move from lose focus from this email field unless you put in at least 8 characters, right? Again, for my contact number, maybe my contact number is a minimum of 10 characters, right? As an example, and I could also specify a format, and the format can be done with regular expressions. And then for my message, maybe at least a couple of characters, 2 characters, like hi, might be my minimum thing. The other thing we haven't specified here is the contact name. We don't even have a name for this person. Contact me, but then you have email address and contact number, but there's no name. What if my email address is like, hey, funkygirl25.com, right, or something like that, right, or whatever. That could be it, right? So maybe that doesn't make any sense. So I think we have to change our form a little bit, and let's change our class too. So going back, let's add a contact name. So maybe the first thing we want is a name. I'm just going to use contact number for this. And I'm going to go up here to the top of the form and add another field. Let's say I forgot the form. I did. So we'll say your full name. So full name. And maybe we want to give some kind of placeholder text, like enter your full name here. And then something like, John Smith, example. By the way, this can be offensive to some. You know, you may want to be careful not to answer this. Depending on it's really from a localization perspecve. Some people may feel offended that you're using a man's name instead of a woman's name. I'm just being honest, right? So sometimes we just put in enter your full name. That might be better from a user experience perspective. You don't want, especially if you want female customers or people to contact us. Maybe this might be not something that's desirable to see, right? So we just put that. We don't put that in at all, right? And instead of contact number, we're going to say contact name. Just refitting. We're just refitting what we had, right? And just going to put the same things here. Remember, we need name. Name is what our variable is called for each of the form elements. So the name attribute equates to a variable for us when we bring it into JavaScript. Okay. So now that we have our contact name, this is good. We have to retrofit our class because our class is going to take that information. So at the top here, where we have our little class, we're going to say name. So we'll say contact name, which is also equal to some kind of default element. We'll say that this dot contact name is equal to contact name. Visual Studio is helping me write this right now, so I can do it quickly. Contact name is important. And then way down where we're doing all this work, we don't just want access to an email address, but we also want our contact name. It's just copy paste. So we're just going to do one of these. So contact name, contact name, contact name. Right, there we go. And the same thing goes here. Maybe I want to print out the contact name, right, because that might be important to do that. So here's my contact name here, contact name. Oh, and then let's copy paste this part in here. And we'll also do that part in here, contact object, contact name. So we can have our contact object fill out contact name. Now we're getting real code hinting here because that is part of the object, right? Okay, so we did that. Clearing the form is good. We got this information here, but what we want to do is we want to get a little event handler for the. So these are the buttons. We did the buttons first, and I want a little event handler that connects to. I just want to check my time, make sure we're on time. I'll show you one. Connects to the name, right? So what I want to do is just like I've done up here, right? I want to make an event handler that's something that I'm going to modify the form. So I'm going to say $, hey, I want to have access to, right, my element that's on the page called my contact name, right? And I want to make a, I want to change. So let's look at change. What change does, it says a function to execute each time the event is triggered, right? Bind an event handler to the change JavaScript event or trigger that event on an element. Now, change, how would I know how to do that? Well, because we're changing something. We're changing some text. Hopefully that'll trigger. I'm also going to get a little callback function. It's inline again, so E, right? And again, I'm going to use the fat arrow function to do that, right? So there's my little event. So anytime this thing changes, I want to spit out a console log. Changed. That means anytime it's going to happen. Anytime. If I do the change event, if I did this, okay? I want to show you this because you can also do it on a per input basis if you want. Now this can be quite annoying, all right? But I'm going to show it to you anyway. All right, so let's run this thing. So I go here and let's take a look at my inspector so you can see what happens when I start typing, okay? So in my console, I go in here and I start typing, right? Oh man, what's going on? How come the event's not triggering? Well, I mean, once I moved to the next field though, take a look what happened. I got that thing changed. I go back, I wipe it out, right? So I say, some new name, and then I go to this field here and all of a sudden it's changed again. So every time that I switch from one field to the other, it detects the change, okay? Here's something else. How about on focus? When I go to that field, I want whatever's in the value to be highlighted, right? I want to select that field, right? Whatever. So if there's something already in there and I want to retype it, I can go in there and change that. So, okay, cool. So that is the change event. Anytime it changes. And what about the other one? So I want to do the same element, but instead of me going in there and changing, I want to do something like focus. So when it gains focus, blur, by the way, is the other thing. Blur is when I lose focus. when I move from one element to the next element, I blur my attention. And that's the way it was done. I know. So here's, focus, gain focus. So let's think how this works. So I go back, and as soon as I click in there, I should get the focus event, right? If I go back to here, I get, and I start typing, so I type here, and I start typing here. You can see I get changed and focus, right? Both happening at the same time. And this is really cool. So if I get the focus event, I want this to be selected. So I want this means this, the royal this, right? I want this to be selected, this dot, and I want selection, I want to highlight. So how do I highlight text? So select text, JavaScript. It's important to do. I want to select it, and it says, okay, this is a bunch of text here, blah, 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 blah. Range.select, right? I knew there was a select element, but I want to make sure that I wanted to use this thing. Let's make sure that this is correct. I think it's select. So, but that's what I want. I want this dot select. Okay, let's see if that works. And if not this, we'll have to go back and do the element itself. And I think maybe it's, or JavaScript select, I can't remember. So if I'm typing in there, okay, so that gave me an error. So it says, I don't understand what select. Select is not a function. What about a jQuery? What about if I said like, hey jQuery, is there some kind of select or something like that that I can do it? Or I can just simply just do the same thing. So here, I want to select, right? Let's try this out. So I gain focus. Sorry. I gain focus, type something in, moved over here. You're going to get the change event, changed. And I go back, it's selected. So why is this good? Because if I want to wipe this out again and retype it, I can do it. I don't have to type in everything again or backspace. Backspacing is really annoying. I can just type Tom again, and now when I go back, it changed again, right? Because it changed from one to the other, right? And I can start typing something else. I can say my email address, so tom@example.com. So this is important. So when I change, right? So when I change or blur, and I know guys, I'm running overtime. I'm almost done. When I change or blur, I can make sure that what my length is. So I can say that something like my length is a certain amount. Again, we're continuing with this next week anyway. We're going to do more forms, more jQuery next week, guys. And I really appreciate your attention. I will post the lab number 2 up on DC Connect by the end of the week. You'll have it so you can work on it. You'll be given a couple weeks to work on it. It'll be due the day of the test, right? So you'll have enough time, and it won't be that long. But I can test for this. I can say if, right, that this particular thing, this value, right, so contact name, so on change, I can check to see that the value, right, this value, if the value, so I want to say the length, right, so the length of this thing, if it's less than 8 characters, because we said that the name, well, I'm just check the name right now, the contact name. I'm saying the contact name has to be 8 characters. I don't know, it's really weird. But if that's true, then I can say console log, contact name, oops, contact name, too short, right? And let's see if that works. If I get that when I go in there, and this is done on change, so I'm going to say Tom, and then I move to the next element, and then its contact name is too short because it detects that it's too short. Okay? And because I can detect it, I can stop you from moving. I can bounce you back to I can set focus, I can bounce you back into that input element until you're ready to go, and I can display a message that right now is hidden. I can create a hidden message that pops up and says your contact name is too short. All right, guys, thank you so much for attending and listening. We covered more jQuery today, and we started with forms. I have multiple pages. Look for that lab number 2. It'll be available this week, and I'll send you a message to let you know when it's done.